What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and we are back. That's right, Top 10 Tuesday is making its glorious return to the Nerd Immersion channel, and will be something we'll be looking forward to doing once a week going forward for the rest of the year. And I have a very exciting first episode for you in the return here for 2022. I might have done it at the beginning of the year and I don't remember, but either way, we're calling this the return. So I have the Monster Manual Expanded. So what we're going to be talking about here is, once again, and a thank you to the DM Dragonix and the Monster Manual Expanded team for sponsoring this video, but we're going to give you my top 10 monsters from the Monster Manual Expanded 1 2nd edition, because yes, there is some new updates here. So if you want to just stay tuned, I've also got a giveaway tied to the Monster Manual Expanded 3, so stay tuned after this and we'll talk about it. So, I'll be giving you my top 10 monsters from the Monster Manual Expanded 1 2nd edition. The reason we're talking about this is because a 2nd edition was released. You'll also notice the front cover has slightly different art as well. And what's contained, what makes this 2nd edition special or different in any way? Well, one, new art assets are contained throughout the book for a variety of the different creatures, which is pretty awesome, and I'll showcase some of those when we go over the top 10. Some new stat blocks entirely were added to the game in some instances, which is pretty cool. But more importantly, the existing stat blocks were updated to be more in line with Wizards of the Coast's new philosophy for challenge rating and different, with what they did with Monsters of the Multiverse. So for those of you unaware, Wizards of the Coast said several monsters contained in, again, specifically Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes and Volo's Guide to Monsters had a challenge rating that was usually, in most cases, higher than it should have been because the monsters weren't lethal enough given their challenge rating. So they made several adjustments to kind of make them earn their challenge rating by doing things like giving them different recharge abilities, in some instances taking their spells and making them not spells but abilities, therefore immune to things like Dispel Magic and Counterspell. It's also restructured to kind of easy break down actions and bonus actions so they're separate. Some monsters also now have legendary actions that did not have legendary actions before. So pretty cool stuff. Now, I did mention a giveaway in the opening, and I did also want to talk to you. I mentioned, or maybe I didn't mention, but either way, all 3 of the Monster Manual Expanded are some of the most popular content contained on the DM's Guild. Routinely, all 3 of them are pretty much in the top 25 most popular titles on the DM's Guild. And as of me making this video, now all 3 titles have hit Adamantine bestseller on the DM's Guild, which is just a ridiculous achievement and amazing. So as such, to celebrate that and the release of the 2nd edition, DM Dragonix and team are giving away 3 physical copies of either the Monster Manual Expanded 1 or 3, your choice. What I'm going to do is I'll put a link in the description, but if you follow me over on Twitter, what happens is I will tweet out the kind of the announcement of this video, say, hey, here's this video, and then if you share, retweet, quote tweet, whatever you want to do with that specific tweet, we will pick 3 winners or 3 people randomly from that, and then you guys will win. Those 3 winners will basically, you'll have about a week from the time this video comes out, so next Tuesday, we'll say, the 30th, get your retweets and things in by then. And then 3 winners will get decided, and then you can either pick Monster Manual Expanded 1 or 3, and you'll get a physical, one of these nice hardcover copies for you to have for yourself. So, again, a huge shout out and thank you to DM Dragonix and team for sponsoring this video. Let's get into it. Number 10. First up is the Ghoul Adept of Orcus, and I'm not going to do this for everyone, but I wanted to showcase sort of the differences, and you can see in the art assets, 2nd edition is on the left, 1st edition is on the right, so you can see the difference clear and the improvement on the art over here for the Ghoul Adept of Orcus. But I also wanted to scroll down because we can showcase the differences in the stat blocks as well. On the most basic of level, you can see that we moved the spell casting from up above to into the action section like we've seen in Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse, but also additional options were added. And I really like this if you're looking for something a little bit of a threatening version of an undead, that you want something more than the traditional ghoul, but you don't want to just kind of outright wreck your player with some more powerful undead. You can see originally it had 2 attacks, 1 bite and 1 claw. Now it can make 3 attacks, each with a different weapon, including bite, claw, or its cleaver that we saw in the art, or it can use its Necrotic Bolt ability twice, which was something it never had. The bite and the claw remain largely unchanged, although the claw's damage has gone down to a d4 plus 2. Again, with the paralysis you expect from a ghoul. We now have a cleaver attack that does a d8 plus 2, but now we have this ranged spell attack of Necrotic Bolt, 60-foot range, 3d8 plus 3 necrotic damage, and it shuts down healing. And then again, we can see the spell casting has been simplified from cantrips, blah, 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 to at will, once per day, twice per day. And like I said, they are a version of a ghoul that has sort of been blessed by Orcus, so that just makes sense. And I think, again, the art is terrifying. I love the art. And this is a great way to just showcase with a monster that doesn't have a massive stat block that we need to kind of sift through to show how much difference and alteration has been taken from the first edition to the second edition. Number 9. The Greater Banshee. This one received a fantastic art update. I love this art. It just looks amazing. If you saw the original, you definitely know that this is an improvement. But it also has adjustments to its stats, and I don't know, I just really like the weird different versions of undead that exist, and things that are beyond just like zombie, skeleton, vampire. I like the more nuanced ones, like we talked about the Ghoul, the Wights, the Banshee. So I think this is pretty awesome, and it has some interesting options because this one now has legendary actions, and actually, I think originally had spellcasting was a higher challenge rating and actually went down, but I actually think I prefer this version better. So we can see standard kind of resistances one has come to expect with undead creatures, as you can see here. Detect Life, that's a standard Banshee ability, now has 2 legendary resistances, and incorporeal movement was a thing I think Banshees had all the while, and now it can use its Horrifying Visage ability, period, and then it makes 1 Corrupting Touch attack, which for this version of a Banshee does 3d6 plus 3 necrotic. The target must make a Wisdom saving throw or be frightened until the end of its next turn, but while frightened, it is also paralyzed. Horrifying Visage, out to 60 feet, DC 15 Wisdom saving throw or be frightened for a minute. And then a Banshee's Wail, their kind of stereotypical ability here, once per day. No effect on constructs and undead. All other creatures within 60 feet must make a DC 15 con save or drop to 0 hit points. If they succeed, they take 5d6 psychic damage instead. Also interesting, now that autognomes are a thing, they would be immune to the Banshee's Wail ability because it does not affect constructs. And kind of the new things that kind of taking this and elevating it aside from adjustments to DCs and damage are the legendary actions that this Banshee has, right? So 3 legendary actions. 1 will allow us to just use Corrupting Touch. 2 will let us use the Kiss of Death ability, which is a melee spell attack against 1 frightened or incapacitated humanoid. Again, we can self-frighten via our Horrifying Visage. On a failed save, the target's hit points are reduced to 0. On a success, they take 46 plus 3 necrotic damage, and their hit point maximum is reduced by an amount equal to the damage taken. It lasts until the target finishes a long rest. It does not affect the creature if it has 0. If its hit point, the creature dies rather if its hit point maximum is 0. And 3 will allow it to use its Wail ability. If it isn't available, she recharges Wail. This is part of the reason why, again, I also appreciate this, because Wail is a really cool, useful ability. But if they save or something goes against it, this also feeds into a little bit more in my mind of the 1D&D aspect, because as we know, at least it stands in the current 1D&D playtest, the sort of recharge or limited use ability are supposed to be the monster's crits, as it were. And this one actually does feel like it could fulfill that bonus, because if they fail the saving throw, they are dropped to 0 hit points. Unfortunately, if you miss that sort of one-off really powerful ability, then the Banshee has no real big guns left, especially because it wouldn't be able to crit. But having the Keening ability allow it to recharge its Wail ability to use it again, that's fantastic. And then again, the fact that if you hit somebody, you can frighten them, and then you could use the Kiss of Death to basically also utilize that same ability while using legendary actions happening outside of traditional turn order. I think this definitely qualifies it. And again, if we see abilities similar to this, and the way things here are handled as sort of the recharge or limited use abilities for monsters going forward with 1D&D, then I may change my mind regarding critical hits. Number 8. The Elder Hags. We have a variety of different Elder Hags. Again, the 3 that were originally contained in the Monster Manual 1, the Elder Green Hag, the Elder Night Hag, and the Elder Sea Hag, all of which have beautifully new updated art. So let's pick the green hag. This is a challenge rating 10 creature. We take a look at it. Right? When it casts a spell and is interrupted by an enemy's counterspell, treat the spell's level as 3 levels higher. That's a very terrifyingly unique ability. Mimicry, Amphibious, that's all pretty standard. We have the Hag's Claw attack, has a Constitution saving throw to reduce a strength score. A Wildfire ranged spell attack that blinds the target. Illusory Appearance is pretty standard stuff. I think they have that normally. Invisible Passage, then the Hag magically turns invisible until she attacks or casts a spell, or until concentration ends. While invisible, she leaves no physical evidence of her passage, so she can only be tracked by magic. And then we have, again, the updated spellcasting block here, showcasing new spells at will, once per day, twice per day, and then Maddening Cackle recharges on a 5 to 6. Each creature within 30 feet of the hag and able to hear it must make a DC 17 Charisma save, or take 3d8 plus 2 psychic damage, and use its reaction to move up to half its speed and make a melee attack against one visible creature of the hag's choice. Again, something like that is actually very interesting. It makes me think, again, in the mindset of D&D 1 playtest, if a character has an ability, something like this, that forces a character to make a saving throw and then move and attack a creature of their choice, the player character in 1 D&D can still crit. So if the monster has some means of forcing them to attack an ally, the player character can crit the player character, which is kind of interesting. Either way, hags are awesome. I love all different kinds of hags. They're terrifying. The art here is fantastic, and if you really want to step things up and bring a whole nother level of terror into your games, consider using these Elder Hags. Number 7. I wanted to jump ahead to the sort of animals, the monsters. What is this specific section is called? Miscellaneous creatures. This is kind of what we have at the back of the standard monster manual. We have things like a dire bear, but we have dire creatures, but we also have giant creatures and monstrous creatures, which I do like having the expansion of existing creatures to just add additional versions of them while still keeping them as beasts, so that if you'd like to let your druid wild shape into them, that's an option and expands a lot for you. Here you can see a bullfrog with a giant cicalia worm. And then what I'm going to cover here, there's a giant robber fly grabbing a kobold. But what we're going to talk about is, also the art is fantastic, is this guy, because it's gross looking, but the art is awesome. The giant velvet worm, which you can see here's a challenge rating 3 beast. Has keen smell and spider climb. It has a bite attack that does 2d6 plus 4 piercing and 3d6 acid. But the big thing is the web spray, which recharges on a 5 to 6. It spits webbing in a line that's 30 feet long, 10 feet wide. Each creature in that line must succeed on a DC 13 Dex save or be restrained by the webbing. As an action, the restrained creature can make a DC 13 Strength check, escaping from the webbing on a success. It ends the effects if the webbing is destroyed. It has an AC 10, 5 hit points, vulnerable to fire damage, and then again immune to poison, psychic, bludgeoning, poison, and psychic damage. It's just terrifying. Like, I wasn't really sure what to expect when I saw this, because I couldn't really picture what a velvet worm looks like. I was imagining something like a little silkworm, and this thing is a large, terrifying worm of my nightmares attacking a giant wolverine. But again, I think you'd be fine if you were to just check out any of the creatures in this section. As you can see, you have monstrous options on top of the giant versions, which really does, again, expand the options for druids in your game if they're trying to come up with different unique options for wild shape. Number 6. The Blackroot Treant. As you can see here, again, we have fantastic new art for it, but this is a terrifying undead creature that once was a living, kind of useful, protective, guardian-type treant, and has become some sort of undead monstrosity that feeds on the life of the living. So let's scroll down. This is challenge rating 13 undead. Has a bunch of different immunities. Again, most of these associated with being either treant and undead, but does have vulnerability to fire still. A living creature that starts its turn within 10 feet just takes necrotic damage from being in its presence. It has false appearance, which most treants have, that allow them to kind of look like a tree when not moving. Siege monster, again, treants thing, double damage to objects and structures. It has a multi-attack, makes 2 rotting slam attacks, which do 3d6 plus 7 bludgeoning plus 3d6 necrotic. If it's a creature, they must make a Constitution saving throw, or their hit point maximum is reduced by an amount equal to the necrotic damage taken. They can throw rocks, as most Treants do. They have spell casting, which makes them a little bit different than your standard Treant. And then they also have animate dead trees once per day. The Treant magically animates 1 or 2 dead trees it can see within 60 feet. Again, very similar to the standard animate trees option of a traditional Treant, but this time they are undead creatures that serve the Blackroot Treant. It also gives me very kind of like Pumpkinhead vibes, and that really is working for me. Number 5. We can't not cover what's contained on the front cover of this book, the Ultimate Tyrant Hive Mother Beholder, which also, if you're going to have a monster list that's based off of the monster manual, at least initially, you can't not have a beholder on the list. So we have the Ultimate Tyrant, the Hive Mother, right? A massive 12-foot diameter monstrosity that dwarfs all other beholders, extremely rare and only found within the beholder communities, and even revered as a god. The centuries-old Ultimate Tyrant holds true power and dominion over all beholders. So it's clearly, I mean, look, this is a Goliath attacking this thing, to give you a little bit of a size reference here. So we have the, it is, in its lair, it is a challenge rating 22. It does have lair actions, as one would expect for a creature of this kind of just epicness. But here's the lair actions. A 50-foot square around an area of ground within 120 feet becomes slimy and toxic. Difficult terrain until initiative count 20 on the next turn. Each creature that starts there must make a Constitution saving throw or just take poison damage. Walls within 120 feet of it sprout grasping appendages until initiative count 20 on the next round. Each creature that starts their turn within 20 feet of such a wall must make a dex save or be grappled. It's a DC 19 to escape, and an eye opens on a solid surface within 60 feet, and an eye ray of the beholder shoots from that eye and can target whoever the beholder chooses. That's pretty standard stuff, that last one there, from traditional beholder layers. Let's get into the challenge rating 21 Ultimate Tyrant. Resistance to poison, immunity to prone, has its anti-magic cone. It is a 150-foot cone of anti-magic. The Ultimate Tyrant decides which way to look. Pretty standard stuff. Has 3 legendary resistances. Even its base bite attack does 48 plus 2 piercing damage. And then we have its eye rays, of which it has 10. But pretty standard, again, for a beholder. It shoots 3 of the following rays at random. Choose reroll duplicates, choosing 1 to 3 targets if it can see within 120 feet of it. So we have the Madness Ray, which is a DC 20 Wisdom saving throw for 5d8 psychic damage. And that target must use its reaction to make a weapon attack against a target within 5 feet of the Ultimate Tyrant's choice. A Withering Ray. These look to all be DC 20. DC 20 con save or take 5d8 necrotic and be weakened for a minute. A weakened creature has disadvantage on strength-based ability checks and saving throws, and weapon attacks that rely on strength deal half damage. The target can make a DC 20 con save at the end of each of its turns to attempt to end this. The Fear Ray, DC 20, be frightened for a minute. They can repeat the saving throw at the end of the turn. The Burning Ray, DC 20 dex save for 68 fire damage and then catching fire. Until someone takes an action to douse them, they take a d10 fire damage at the start of each of their turns. Successful save is half damage and no set on fire. Stupefying Ray, DC 20 intelligence saving throw for 5d8 psychic damage and be stunned for 1 minute, but you do get to repeat that saving throw at the end of each of your turns. The Telekinetic Ray, DC 20 strength save, or it moves up to 30 feet in any direction if it's restrained by the Ray's telekinetic grip until the start of the Ultimate Tyrant's next turn, or until the Tyrant is incapacitated. If the target is an object weighing 300 pounds or less that isn't being worn or carried, it is moved up to 30 feet in any direction. The Tyrant can also exert fine control on objects within this ray, such as manipulating a simple tool or opening a door or container. Frost Ray, Constitution save for 5d8 cold damage and being slowed. It looks like it's slowed as per the spell. Speed halved. They can't take reactions and either take an action or bonus action, not both. Repeat the saving throw at the end of the turn. Petrification Ray, DC 20 dex save. On a failure, it is turned to stone and is restrained. Repeats the saving throw at the end, begins to turn to stone, and is restrained. It repeats the saving throw at the end of its next turn. On a success, the effect ends. On a failure, it is petrified. So 2 saves to become petrified. Disintegration Ray, DC 20 Dex save or take 12d8 force damage. If you reduce the creature to 0 hit points, its body disintegrates as per usual. If the target is large or smaller, non-magical object or creation of magical force, it is disintegrated without a saving throw. If it is huge or larger, disintegrates a 10-foot cube of it. And then lastly, the Death Ray, DC 20 Dex save for 12d10 necrotic damage, and it dies if it's dropped to 0 hit points. On top of all of that stuff, this one also has psionics. While the Tyrant's anti-magic cone is inactive, the Ultimate Tyrant casts one of the following spells requiring no material components and using intelligence as its stat, and DC 20 on these. At will, darkness, detect magic, detect thoughts, and see invisibility. Twice per day, banishment, dispel magic, move earth and stone skin. And once per day, Abby Dalzim's horrid wilting, globe of invulnerability, power word, stun, and wall of force. All of those, like, that's a decent amount of different spells that it can cast. Again, it would be an action to cast those spells, whereas it could shoot 3 eye rays. But if you can think about what you'd be able to do by, like, wall of forcing and separating a group so that they can't interact with one another, stunning someone, making yourself invulnerable from a globe of invulnerability. There's a lot of funky stuff that you can do with this, and adding psionics on top of the 10 eye rays of a beholder is just that much crazier. And that's not even to talk about the legendary actions that it has, of which it has 3. One for the anti-magic cone, it turns which way the cone faces and whether the cone changes basically the cone's trajectory. Command Beholder, the ultimate target targets one allied beholder within 60 feet of it that can see and hear it. That target uses its reaction to make 1 bite or use a random eye ray. For legendary actions, we have 1 to 3 for eye ray. The ultimate tyrant uses up to 3 random eye rays, 1 ray per use. But again, you could use this eye ray legendary action to spend all 3 actions at the end of somebody else's turn to fire off 3 rays before your turn and get them back. Psionics, you can use 3 to use its spellcasting ability. And then lastly, we have Reaction, which is again something that's been added per the updates to Mordenkainen and Monsters of the Multiverse. Redirect Anti-Magic Cone. When the Ultimate Tyrant sees a creature within 150 feet of it cast a spell, it can activate its Anti-Magic Cone and point in that direction. Essentially giving the Beholder counterspell when it sees someone casting a spell, but instead of actually casting counterspell, it just shuts down magic in a 150-foot cone, which is terrifying because then the eye rays can still do their thing. So, yeah, there's a reason this guy's on the front cover of the book. He's pretty freaking awesome. Number 4. The Aboleth Slime Lord. Aboleths are some of my favorite monsters. I love aberrations as well as undead, just because aberrations are so weird. And you can have a lot of fun. I think really the Aboleth and Tomb of Annihilation really kind of solidified my love for them. But look at how disgustingly gross the Slime Lord Aboleth is. So it's a little bit different. Its mucus is acidic. But we're going to talk about some of the funky stuff about it. It's got lair actions, right? It can cast Vitriolic Sphere. Pools of water within 120 feet of it surge upward. And creatures within that must make a strength saving throw or be knocked prone. And water in the Aboleth Slime Lord's lair magically becomes a conduit for the creature's rage. It can target any number of creatures within such water within 120 feet, make them take psychic damage. So, here's the stat block for our Slime Lord. DC 14, immunity to acid. Amphibious, that's pretty standard stuff. Probing telepathy, also standard for an Aboleth. But we have acidic mucus cloud. While underwater, the Aboleth is surrounded by transformative mucus. A creature that touches the Aboleth or hits it with a melee attack within 5 feet takes 2d6 acid damage and must make a DC 16 con save or be diseased for a d4 hours. The diseased creature can only breathe underwater. We have multi-attack with 3 tentacles. Alternatively, you can use 2 Slime Orb, which is just a wonderful name for an attack. Slime Orb has 120-foot range, does 46 acid damage, and the creature must make a d6 strength saving throw or be restrained, as you are literally covered in acidic slime. Or its traditional tentacle attack with 10-foot reach, does bludgeoning plus acid damage. You must make a DC 16 con save or be diseased. The disease has no effect for 1 minute and can be removed by any magic that cures disease. After 1 minute, the diseased creature's skin becomes translucent and slimy, and it can't regain hit points unless it's underwater. And the disease can only be removed by the heal spell or other disease-curing spells of 6th level or higher. When the creature is outside of a body of water, it takes D12 acid damage every 10 minutes until moisture is applied to the skin before 10 minutes have passed. A tail attack that also does, again, we're seeing the additional acid damage, and then it has the Aboleth's Enslave ability for a DC 6 Wisdom saving throw. And then as far as legendary actions, we have three legendary actions, one used for a tail swipe attack, two for a psychic drain. One of the creatures charmed, potentially by the Enslave ability, takes 5d6 psychic damage, and the Aboleth regains that, or Slime Sphere for 3 actions. It conjures a ball of acidic slime that explodes at a point. It's basically like a fireball, but with slime. Within 120 feet, each creature in a 20-foot radius sphere centered on that point must succeed on a DC 16 strength saving throw. I like that it's strength save, too. It just adds this a little funky, right? 46 acid damage and be restrained until they escape from the slime. The DC to escape is a DC 16 strength check, not a saving throw, check. As an action to free yourself, ending the effect on a success. Dealing 10 fire damage to the slime also destroys it, and a restrained creature takes 3d6 acid damage at the start of each of the Aboleth's turn if you remain restrained by it. On a successful save, they take half as much damage and aren't restrained. It's not like a too crazy of a change, but it's enough to switch things up if your players are used to fighting Aboleths. Number 3. Owlbears, because we have not just one option here, but several different options. And look at how swole these owlbears are. We have the Iron Feather Owlbear, the Winterclaw Owlbear, the Dire Owlbear, and the Great Horned Owlbear. I gotta go for this dude who looks like he's just flexing as hard as can be, this Winterclaw Owlbear. So, usually inhabiting only Arctic areas, the Winterclaw Owlbear is a beast that constantly projects a deadly frost aura that can chill the blood of creatures nearby. It's challenge rating 5. A creature that starts its turn within 10 feet of the owlbear takes 2d6 cold damage and can't use its reactions until the end of the owlbear's next turn. It has keen sight and smell. And then a multi-attack, right? 1 beak, 1 claw. The beak does a 2d6 plus 6 piercing plus a d6 cold. The claws do 2d10 plus 6 slashing plus 2d6 cold. And it also has a recharging cold breath weapon that recharges on a 5-6. 15-foot cone. Each creature in the area must make a DC 17 con save or take 8d6 cold damage. It's, again, it's just a simple change, but I couldn't resist the art there of him just kind of flexing super hard, just all this frost energy. But none of your players are likely going to expect an owlbear to bust out a breath weapon, which would just be pretty awesome to see. Number 2. The Ettercap, specifically in this instance, the Ettercap Spidermaster, which is one of the creatures that I actually referenced in my original review of this when it first came out on the DM's Guild back for the original Monster Manual Expanded. So you'll see a lot of things that are what you would expect for an Ettercap to have, things like Spider Climb, Web Sense, Web Walker, and Woodland Strider, but the Spidermaster has some really funky, cool abilities that I also like. So, multi-attack, it makes 2 attacks, 1 bite and 1 with its claws. It can also use command, spider, or web if they're available. So the bite is pretty standard, right? Piercing damage and poison damage. Must make a con save or be poisoned for a minute. Claws are 2d4 plus 2 slashing. This guy, however, has spellcasting. Again, something you're not going to expect an Ettercap to have. Druidcraft, Poison Spray, Mold Earth at will. Blight, Jump, and Moonbeam twice per day, and Conjure Animals, Spiders Only, Confusion, Dispel Magic, Insect Plague, Spiders Only, and Spike Growth. That's not a huge spread of spells, but some of those, something like Blight, can be a very powerful thing. I mean, it's challenge rating 7, so depending on when you throw it at your players. Ettercap Spidermaster really shines when you have other spiders present for the combat. Also, Moonbeam, I thought could be a really interesting way to, like, if a druid wild shapes and the enemy spellcaster moonbeams the druid out of their wild shape, that could be a funky thing too. But again, like I said, it works best when you have spider allies to help it, like this command spider ability. Targets 1 allied spider within 30 feet. If it can see and hear the Ettercap, it uses its reaction to make 1 weapon attack or move up to its speed. Not only could you do that, but it also has the ability to summon spiders once per short, or recharges after a short or long rest. It summons 2d6 giant wolf spiders or a d3 giant spiders. They appear in unoccupied space within 30 feet of the Ettercap and acts as its allies. They act right after the Ettercap on the same initiative count and fight until they're destroyed. So the Ettercap goes first, and then all of the spiders it summons goes right after. So that's a pretty big hit if you manage to roll pretty high on your spider summon. They remain for an hour until the Ettercap dies, or fight until the Ettercap dismisses them as an action. It also has a web ability that recharges on a 4 to 6, 30-60 on the range. Works on a larger, smaller creature. If hit, they're restrained by the webbing. They must make a strength check to be able to escape. And again, the Spidermaster also has legendary actions, of which it has 3. Crawl, it moves up to half its speed for 1 legendary action. Attack, it makes an attack with its claws. Command, it uses the command spider action, or 2 for cast a spell, and allows it to use its spell casting. Again, a really interesting way. I feel like spiders are a pretty common, popular D&D monster for players to face. However, they kind of start to fall off pretty early on because the spiders only kind of go to so far. But if you add something like an Ettercap to help manage the spiders, or in this case, summon them into existence, it can really turn the tide of that battle and keep spiders a more terrifying monster even into later levels. Number 1. The Ankheg Brood Queen. Only fitting that I end this top 10 with the first monster that I pulled aside to discuss in the original Monster Manual Expanded review, and that is the Ankheg Brood Queen. Now, we also have one thing that I will say is we have additional stat blocks in here. For example, there's an Ankheg Soldier. That stat block did not exist in the original Monster Manual Expanded, so it was something that was just added for this release. But as such, the Brood Queen, again, you can very much, because of their acidic spray and things of that nature, you could use these to do an okay job of replicating xenomorphs in your game. You could reskin them with a little bit of tweaking. It would be easy. But as such, the Queen is the most powerful of them, right? Lays the eggs, fiercely territorial, and so on. She has a lair with lair actions, right? She causes a D6 Ankheg broodlings to hatch, which is, again, a stat block contained here, within 60 feet. I think, again, we're talking literal little guys here, but they could work for face huggers if you needed them to. It just regains 20 hit points, or it emits a piercing shriek. Each non-Ankheg within 30 feet must make a DC 16 con save or become deafened for a minute. If you fail by 5 or more, you're also stunned. And here is her stat block in all its glory. She has 1 legendary resistance. She has the Tunneler ability to make burrow through solid rock at half her burrowing speed. And then she has the multi-attack option here, 1 bite and 2 4-leg attacks. The bite has a 10-foot reach, does 3d6 plus 5 slashing and 2d6 acid damage. If the target is huge or smaller, it is grappled. Until the grapple ends, it can only grapple 1 creature, but has advantage on its attack rolls to do so. 2 4-leg attacks, also 10-foot reach, a d8 plus 5 piercing damage. Has its acid spray ability here, recharges on a 5 to 6. 60 feet long, 5-foot wide line of acid, DC... provided that it has no creature grappled in its mouth, right? It can't spit the acid if it's got the creature in its mouth. Each creature in that line must make a DC 17 dex save or take 8d6 acid damage, half on a success. And then also has a bonus action here, Burst Forth, that recharges on a short or long rest. While underground, the Brood Queen burrows at least 10 feet straight, 10 feet straight, I mean, maybe a straight line, 10 feet straight, and breaks through a ground or wall surface. During this move, it can enter large or smaller creature spaces. A creature whose space the Brood Queen enters must make a DC 16 dex save. On a failure, they're pushed 5 feet to the nearest space out of the Brood Queen's path. On a failure, they fall prone and take 3d6 plus 5 bludgeoning damage. If the Brood Queen remains in the prone creature's space, the creature is also restrained until it is no longer in the same space as the Brood Queen. While restrained, the creature or another creature within 5 feet can make a DC 15 strength check to try and move them out of it. And then we have her legendary actions here. 3 legendary actions. Move for 1, move up to half her movement speed. Impale to make a 4-leg attack. Lay Broodling Egg. The Brood Queen lays a d6 broodling eggs. The broodling eggs appear in the nearest space within 10 feet of the Brood Queen. Each egg has AC 5, 10 hit points, and a broodling hatches before the start. Broodling hatches before the start of the Brood Queen's next turn. When a broodling egg hatches, an Ankheg broodling appears within 5 feet of the hatched egg and immediately acts that turn. The Ankheg broodling is friendly to the Brood Queen and its allies and hostile to all non-Ankheg creatures. And then again, for 2 actions, we have Command Ankheg. It targets 1d4 allied Ankhegs within 30 feet. They use their reaction to move up to half their movement speed and make a melee attack. And we can see again, here is the Broodling down below. Also has, just, challenge rating 1/4, but if you were to, she could at any point as a legendary action or multiple times throughout the turn lay up to, at least if she used that for nothing else, she could lay potentially, if you rolled 6 every time, up to 18 broodling eggs on a turn. So that also diverts the party's focus because now there's these eggs. But on top of that, don't forget that as a lair action, she can then cause a d6 broodling eggs to hatch as a lair action. But the ones that she lays as part of the legendary action hatch before the start of her next turn. So very quickly, a broodling, or an Ankheg brood queen, rather, can fill an area with eggs, and then now you just have a ton of little mobs to deal with over time, which can just chip you down slowly while she's still moving around, spraying acid, bursting up through the ground. Again, it definitely isn't the best analog for a Xenomorph Hive, but it's pretty damn close, and that makes me pretty excited. So anyway, folks, there you go. That is my top 10 monsters from the Monster Manual Expanded 1 2nd Edition. I know that's a lot to say, but anyway, again, a huge thank you to DM Dragonix for sending me over the physical copy for review purposes, as well as sending me, and just also, like I said, if you have this copy digitally already, you can just re-download the 2nd edition. You don't have to buy it a second time if you bought it once years ago. So thank you again to DM Dragonix. Again, be sure to check that link in the description to be able to enter to win a free physical copy. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And a thank you to my patrons over on Patreon for continuing to support me and the channel. Be sure to tune in next week where I will continue bringing out this Top 10 Tuesday series as I had originally planned all year. But well, hey, you know, better late than never. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.